Marcus Rivera never looked like a warrior, standing at 5 feet 8 inches with graying hair at his temples and gentle brown eyes. He seemed more like someone's favorite uncle than a member of an elite military unit. For 3 years, he had served as the primary driver for SEAL Team Alpha, a job that most people thought was simple and safe. They were wrong on both counts. The other SEALs called him Wheels with genuine respect, though outsiders often missed the meaning behind the nickname. Marcus had earned his place on the team not through combat prowess that anyone knew about, but through his incredible driving skills and his calm presence under pressure. He could navigate through the narrow streets of Baghdad while under fire, keep a steady hand on the wheel during explosions, and always got his team where they needed to go. What nobody knew, not even his closest teammates, was that Marcus had a secret past. Before joining the Navy, he had spent 4 years in the Army Rangers, where he had seen more combat than most soldiers see in a lifetime. A roadside bomb had injured his leg badly enough to end his infantry career, but not badly enough to keep him out of the military entirely. The Navy had offered him a chance to serve in a support role, and he had taken it gladly. Marcus preferred it this way. He was tired of killing, tired of the constant adrenaline, tired of watching friends die. Driving seemed like a peaceful way to serve his country and support the men who reminded him of his younger self. He kept his combat experience to himself, letting others assume he was just a regular sailor who had learned to drive armored vehicles. The team was preparing for what seemed like a routine mission in Afghanistan. Intelligence reports suggested they would be extracting a high-value target from a compound in a remote valley. The plan was simple. Drive in fast, grab the target, and drive out before enemy forces could respond effectively. Marcus had done dozens of similar missions, and this one felt no different as he checked his vehicle and planned the route. Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson, the team leader, briefed everyone on the mission details. The compound sat at the end of a narrow valley with only one road leading in and out. Marcus would drop the team at the compound, wait in the vehicle, and be ready for a quick extraction. Intelligence suggested minimal enemy presence in the area, maybe a few guards at most. As Marcus loaded extra ammunition and medical supplies into the armored vehicle, Sergeant Mike Chen, the team's medic, joked about how Marcus always seemed so calm before missions. "Don't you ever get nervous, Wheels?" Chen asked with a grin. Marcus smiled back and shrugged. "Just focus on the job," he replied, the same answer he always gave. That evening, as the team prepared their gear, Marcus sat quietly in his bunk, cleaning his sidearm. It was a ritual he had maintained since his Army days, though he rarely expected to use the weapon. The familiar motions of disassembly, cleaning, and reassembly helped calm his mind before missions. He thought about his wife Sarah back home in San Diego, who believed he spent his deployments doing maintenance work on vehicles far from any danger. The next morning dawned clear and cold in the Afghan mountains. The team loaded into Marcus's vehicle before sunrise, their breath visible in the frigid air. As always, Marcus had arrived early to warm up the engine and double-check all systems. The armored truck was his pride and joy, modified with extra protection and communication equipment that he maintained himself. As they drove through the mountain passes toward their target, the SEALs went over the mission plan one more time. Marcus listened while keeping his eyes on the treacherous road, navigating around potholes and loose rocks that could damage the vehicle or slow their progress. The route would take them 3 hours each way, winding through valleys that offered both concealment and potential ambush sites. Halfway to the target, they passed through a small village where children waved at the armored vehicle, and adults watched from doorways with unreadable expressions. Marcus always wondered what the locals thought of American soldiers passing through their communities. Some were surely grateful for protection from Taliban forces, while others probably wished all foreign troops would leave their country. The radio crackled with updates from headquarters as they approached the target area. Drone surveillance showed the compound appeared quiet, with only 2 guards visible at the main gate. The intelligence assessment remained unchanged. This should be a quick in-and-out operation. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his stomach that came before every mission, a reminder that in combat, nothing ever went exactly according to plan. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the target valley, Marcus pulled the vehicle into a concealed position behind a cluster of rocks. Through his binoculars, Lieutenant Commander Thompson studied the compound below, while the rest of the team prepared their equipment. The building looked exactly as described in their briefings. A two-story structure surrounded by a low wall, with the main road leading directly to the front gate. "Looks good," Thompson announced. "Marcus, take us down. Same drill as always. Drop us at the compound, stay with the vehicle, and be ready to move when we call for extraction." Marcus nodded and put the truck in gear. In 20 minutes he thought they would have their target and be heading home. He had no idea that in the next few hours he would face the fight of his life. The vehicle rumbled down the slope toward the compound, kicking up dust despite Marcus's careful driving. Everything looked normal as they approached the target, but something felt wrong to Marcus. His years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and those instincts were telling him that this mission was about to go very badly. He kept his concerns to himself, focusing on getting his teammates to their destination safely, but his hand moved unconsciously to check his sidearm one more time. The first sign that something was wrong came when Marcus noticed the compound's front gate, standing slightly open. During his pre-mission briefing review, intelligence photos had shown it closed and secured. Small details like this had kept him alive during his Army days, and he immediately felt his pulse quicken. He keyed his radio to alert the team, but before he could speak, Lieutenant Commander Thompson was already giving orders. "Gates open," Thompson observed. "Could mean our target is trying to run, or it could mean trouble. Stay sharp, everyone." The SEALs checked their weapons one final time as Marcus guided the armored vehicle through the compound's entrance. The courtyard appeared empty except for an old motorcycle leaning against one wall and some scattered tools that suggested recent activity. Marcus positioned the vehicle near the main building's entrance, angling it for a quick departure as he always did. The engine idled quietly while the 5 SEALs dismounted and moved toward the building with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, they had disappeared inside, leaving Marcus alone in the driver's seat with only radio chatter to keep him company. The first few minutes passed normally. Through his radio, Marcus heard the team moving through the building, clearing rooms and searching for their target. Thompson's voice remained calm and professional as he coordinated the search. "Room 1 clear. Moving to room 2. No sign of the target yet." Everything seemed to be going according to plan. Then Marcus noticed movement on the ridge overlooking the compound. At first he thought it might be a goat or wild animal, but the movement was too deliberate, too purposeful. He grabbed his binoculars and focused on the spot where he had seen motion. What he saw made his blood run cold. Armed men were taking positions along the entire ridgeline, at least 20 of them that he could count. "Alpha Leader, this is Wheels." Marcus spoke urgently into his radio. "We've got company. Multiple hostiles on the ridgeline. Looks like they're setting up for an ambush." Thompson's response came back immediately. "Copy that, Wheels. We're still searching for the target. How many are we talking about?" Before Marcus could answer, the world exploded around him. Gunfire erupted from every direction as enemy fighters opened up with automatic weapons from concealed positions. The armored vehicle shook under the impact of dozens of bullets striking its reinforced hull. Marcus ducked instinctively as the windshield spiderwebbed from multiple impacts, though the bulletproof glass held. Inside the building, he could hear intense gunfire as his teammates engaged enemies they had walked into. This had been a trap from the beginning, with the team lured into a carefully prepared ambush. The target had never been here, or if he had been, he was long gone by now. Marcus realized with growing horror that his friends were trapped inside a building surrounded by hostile forces. "Alpha Leader, what's your status?" Marcus called into his radio while bullets continued to ping off his vehicle. Thompson's reply came between bursts of gunfire. "We're pinned down on the 2nd floor. Multiple hostiles in the building and more coming through the back entrance. We need immediate extraction, but we can't get to the vehicle." Marcus assessed the situation quickly. The enemy had positioned fighters on the surrounding ridges with clear fields of fire, covering the compound's entrance. More fighters were moving through the compound itself, trying to surround the building where his teammates were trapped. The original plan called for him to wait for the team to return to the vehicle, but that was clearly impossible now. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt the familiar surge of combat adrenaline that he thought he had left behind. His training from the Army Rangers came flooding back as he studied the tactical situation. The enemy had superior numbers and position, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed the driver would be an easy target to eliminate or ignore. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of staying with the vehicle as ordered, he was going to fight his way to his teammates. He checked his weapons, a M9 pistol with 3 extra magazines, and a M4 carbine that he always kept in the vehicle despite regulations suggesting drivers didn't need rifles. Today he was grateful for his paranoia. The enemy fire intensified as Marcus prepared to leave the vehicle. Through the damaged windshield, he could see muzzle flashes from at least a dozen positions around the compound. The fighters on the ridges were providing covering fire, while others moved closer to the building where the SEALs were trapped. Marcus keyed his radio one more time. "Alpha Leader, I'm coming to get you. Hold your position and be ready to move when I give the signal." Thompson's response was immediate and urgent. "Negative, Wheels. Stay with the vehicle. That's an order." But Marcus was already moving. He kicked open the driver's door and rolled out of the vehicle, using its bulk as cover while he oriented himself. The nearest enemy position was about 50 yards away behind a low wall. Marcus could see the fighter's muzzle flash as he fired toward the building. Taking careful aim with his rifle, Marcus squeezed the trigger once. The enemy fighter dropped immediately. The shot announced Marcus's presence to every hostile in the compound. Suddenly, he became a primary target as fighters redirected their fire toward him. Bullets sparked off the armored vehicle and kicked up dust around his feet as Marcus moved from cover to cover, working his way toward the building where his teammates were trapped. His first target had been easy. Caught by surprise and focused on the building, the next ones would be much harder. Marcus sprinted toward a concrete barrier about 20 yards from his vehicle, diving behind it just as a burst of automatic fire tore through the space where he had been running. He was committed now, with no way back to the safety of his armored vehicle. From inside the building, he could hear his teammates calling out enemy positions to each other. They were still alive and fighting, but Marcus could tell from the sound of the gunfire that they were running low on ammunition. Time was running out for all of them. Marcus took a deep breath, checked his rifle, and prepared to show these enemies exactly what a SEAL team driver could do when his friends were in danger. Marcus moved like a different person once the shooting started. The quiet, gentle driver his teammates knew disappeared, replaced by the hardened Army Ranger he had once been. Years of muscle memory took over as he flowed from cover to cover, his rifle tracking targets with deadly precision. From his position behind the concrete barrier, Marcus could see 3 enemy fighters positioned around a broken fountain in the compound's center. They were firing toward the building in disciplined bursts, clearly experienced fighters rather than untrained militia. Marcus waited for a lull in their firing pattern, then rose quickly and engaged the closest target. His first shot took the fighter in the chest, dropping him instantly. The other 2 spun toward Marcus's position, but he was already moving to new cover behind a pile of construction materials. Their return fire chipped concrete and scattered dust, but Marcus was already gone. He had learned long ago that staying still in a firefight was the fastest way to die. The second fighter made the mistake of pursuing Marcus too aggressively. As he rounded the corner of the material pile, Marcus was waiting with his rifle raised. The range was less than 10 yards, and Marcus didn't miss. 2 down, but the third fighter had repositioned himself and was now flanking Marcus's position. Marcus heard the footsteps, approaching from his left, and spun just in time to see the enemy fighter raising his AK-47. Time seemed to slow as both men brought their weapons to bear. Marcus's training gave him the advantage. His rifle was already halfway to his shoulder when his opponent was still lifting his weapon from a low carry position. The shot echoed through the compound as Marcus fired first. The enemy fighter stumbled backward and fell, his weapon clattering across the stone courtyard. 3 down in less than 2 minutes, but Marcus knew this was just the beginning. He could see more fighters moving through the compound, and the ones on the ridge were starting to adjust their positions to get better angles on him. From inside the building, Sergeant Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "Wheels, what the hell is happening out there? That didn't sound like a pistol." Marcus smiled grimly as he reloaded his rifle. His teammates were about to learn something new about their driver. "I'm working my way to you," Marcus replied. "Stay put and keep your heads down. I'm going to clear a path." He could hear Thompson trying to protest, but Marcus had already switched his radio to a different channel. Right now, he needed to focus entirely on the fight. The building where his teammates were trapped sat about 40 yards away across open ground. Between Marcus and the building, at least 6 enemy fighters had taken positions behind various pieces of cover. Getting across that space alive would require every skill he had learned during his years as a ranger. Marcus studied the terrain and enemy positions, formulating a plan. An old truck sat halfway between his current position and the building, offering potential cover if he could reach it. Beyond that, a low stone wall might provide protection for the final approach. The key would be timing and movement. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt, a piece of equipment that had raised eyebrows when he first started carrying it. Just in case, he had always told anyone who asked. Now he was grateful for his caution. Marcus pulled the pin and counted to 3 before hurling the grenade toward a cluster of fighters behind some metal drums. The explosion sent shrapnel flying and created a cloud of dust and smoke that temporarily obscured vision across part of the compound. Marcus used the distraction to sprint toward the old truck, covering the ground in seconds while the enemy was still reacting to the blast. He slid behind the truck's engine block just as bullets began tracking his movement. From this new position, Marcus had better angles on several enemy positions. He methodically engaged targets using single, well-aimed shots rather than wasting ammunition on full auto bursts. His marksmanship training served him well as he dropped one fighter after another, each shot carefully placed for maximum effectiveness. The fighters on the ridge began to realize that the compound's lone American was more dangerous than they had expected. Marcus could see them repositioning, trying to get direct fire on his location. A sniper on the eastern ridge had him in his sights and was preparing to take a shot when Marcus spotted him first. The range was over 200 yards, a challenging shot with a standard M4 carbine, but Marcus had always been an exceptional marksman. He steadied his rifle against the truck's fender, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the trigger slowly. Through his scope, he saw the enemy sniper jerk and fall backward, 4-5-6 down. His radio crackled with Thompson's voice. "Wheels, I don't know what's gotten into you, but whatever you're doing, keep it up. The pressure on our position is definitely decreasing." Marcus allowed himself a brief smile. His teammates were starting to understand that their quiet driver had hidden depths. But the fight was far from over. Marcus counted at least 15 more enemy fighters in various positions around the compound, and he was running low on rifle ammunition. His 3 spare magazines were down to 1.5, and he still had to cross the remaining 20 yards to reach his teammates. 2 fighters broke from cover near the building, apparently trying to flank Marcus's position while he was focused on the ridgeline. Marcus saw them coming and shifted his aim quickly. The first fighter went down with a shot to the center mass, but the second reached cover behind a concrete pillar before Marcus could engage him. This fighter was smarter than the others, using the pillar as concealment while he maneuvered for a clear shot at Marcus. Marcus realized he would have to abandon his current position soon, or risk being pinned down by accurate fire from multiple directions. The stone wall near the building was looking more attractive by the minute. Marcus prepared for another sprint across open ground, knowing that each movement was becoming more dangerous as the remaining enemy fighters learned his tactics and began to coordinate their efforts. But his teammates were still trapped in that building, and Marcus was determined to reach them no matter what the cost. He checked his remaining ammunition one more time, said a quick prayer, and prepared to move. The quiet driver was gone completely now, replaced by a warrior who would stop at nothing to save his friends. The enemy fighters were about to learn exactly what kind of man they were really facing. Marcus made his move toward the stone wall in a zigzag pattern that made him a difficult target. Bullets whined past his head and kicked up dust at his feet, but his unpredictable movement kept the enemy from getting a solid hit. He dove behind the wall just as a burst of automatic fire chewed up the ground where he had been running. From this new position, Marcus could hear his teammates more clearly through the building's walls. They were still putting up fierce resistance, but he could tell from the sound of their weapons that they were indeed running low on ammunition. Thompson's voice came over the radio with increasing urgency. "Wheels, we need that extraction soon. We're down to our last magazines, and they're bringing up more fighters through the back of the building." Marcus keyed his mic quickly. "Almost there. Get ready to move when I breach the wall." The stone wall that provided Marcus cover also prevented him from seeing exactly where all the remaining enemy fighters were positioned. He needed to get a better view of the battlefield to plan his final approach to the building. Carefully, he raised his head above the wall to scan the area. What he saw made him curse under his breath. At least 8 fighters had positioned themselves in a semicircle around the building, with others moving to surround his current position. Worse, he could see a group of fighters setting up what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher on the ridge. If they got that weapon operational, both Marcus and his teammates would be in serious trouble. Marcus realized he needed to change tactics. Instead of trying to reach the building, he decided to draw the enemy fighters away from it by making himself an irresistible target. It was a dangerous gamble, but it might give his teammates the opening they needed to fight their way out. He pulled out his last fragmentation grenade and hurled it toward the group of fighters closest to the building. The explosion scattered them and created another cloud of dust and debris. In the confusion that followed, Marcus stood up from behind the wall and began advancing directly toward the largest concentration of enemy fighters. His bold move caught the enemies by surprise. Most fighters expect their opponents to seek cover and try to avoid contact, not charge directly at superior numbers. Marcus used their momentary hesitation to his advantage, engaging targets rapidly as he advanced across the open ground. His rifle cracked repeatedly as he moved forward, each shot aimed and deliberate. 7 down, 8 down, 9 down. Marcus was in what soldiers call the zone, a state of heightened awareness where time seems to slow, and every movement has perfect clarity. His Army Ranger training had prepared him for exactly this kind of situation, but his aggressive advance had a price. With no cover between him and the enemy, Marcus was exposed to fire from multiple directions. A bullet grazed his left shoulder, spinning him partially around but not stopping his forward momentum. Another bullet tore through his pants leg, missing flesh but reminding him how exposed he was. The fighter with the RPG on the ridge was almost ready to fire. Marcus could see him adjusting the weapon's aim toward the building where the SEALs were trapped. If that rocket reached its target, his teammates would be finished. Marcus made a split-second decision that would define the rest of the fight. He changed direction and began running directly up the slope toward the ridge, abandoning any pretense of tactical movement for raw speed. The remaining fighters in the compound redirected their fire toward him, but the steep angle and his rapid movement made him a difficult target. Bullets sparked off rocks around him as he climbed. The fighter with the RPG saw Marcus coming and tried to swivel the weapon toward this new threat. But the launcher was heavy and awkward, designed for stationary targets rather than quick engagement. Marcus reached the ridgeline while the fighter was still trying to bring the weapon to bear. At a range of less than 20 feet, Marcus put 3 quick shots into the RPG operator. The man fell backward, his weapon clattering down the rocky slope, but Marcus's dramatic charge had cost him. He was now at the top of the ridge with limited cover and enemy fighters converging on his position from below. His radio crackled with Thompson's voice. "Wheels, I don't know what the hell you think you're doing, but you've given us an opening. We're fighting our way out of the building now." Marcus smiled grimly. His gamble was working, even if it meant sacrificing his own safety. From his elevated position, Marcus had excellent visibility of the entire compound. He could see his teammates emerging from the building, moving in tactical formation as they engaged the remaining enemy fighters. But he could also see more hostiles approaching from the valley entrance, reinforcements that would arrive within minutes. Marcus began engaging targets from the ridge, using his height advantage to pick off enemy fighters who thought they were safely concealed. His rifle work was precise and deadly, each shot carefully aimed to conserve his dwindling ammunition supply. 10 down, 11 down, 12 down. But the enemy fighters below had figured out his position and were concentrating their fire on the ridgeline. Rock fragments exploded around Marcus as bullets struck the stone outcropping where he had taken cover. A ricochet caught him in the thigh, sending a sharp pain down his leg but not incapacitating him. Marcus looked down at the compound and saw his teammates moving toward their original extraction point near the armored vehicle. They were fighting hard but making progress against the remaining enemies. However, he also saw the reinforcements getting closer. At least a dozen more fighters approaching on foot and several vehicles kicking up dust clouds in the distance. He made another difficult decision. Instead of trying to rejoin his teammates, Marcus would stay on the ridge and continue engaging enemies from his elevated position. He could provide overwatch and help protect their withdrawal, even if it meant facing overwhelming odds by himself. "Alpha Leader, this is Wheels," Marcus called into his radio. "Get to the vehicle and start the extraction. I'll provide cover from up here." Thompson's response was immediate and angry. "Negative, Wheels. We're not leaving you behind." Marcus smiled at his teammates' loyalty, but he knew the tactical situation better than anyone. "That's not a request, it's an order from your driver," he said with dark humor. "Get out of here while you can. That's what I'm here for." He could see the reinforcements were almost at the compound entrance. In a few more minutes, his teammates would be facing impossible odds. Marcus settled into a more stable firing position and prepared to make his stand on the ridge, knowing that every enemy fighter he could stop here was one less that his friends would have to face. Marcus positioned himself behind a large boulder near the ridge's highest point, giving him commanding views of both the compound below and the valley entrance where reinforcements were arriving. His rifle had less than half a magazine remaining, and he was down to his last spare magazine after that. Every shot would have to count. The first group of reinforcements reached the compound just as his teammates made it to their armored vehicle. Marcus could see Thompson frantically trying to get the engine started, while the other SEALs provided covering fire. The vehicle had taken damage during the initial ambush, and starting it was proving more difficult than usual. Marcus began engaging the new arrivals with systematic precision. His elevated position gave him clear shots at targets that his teammates couldn't even see yet. 13 down, 14 down, 15 down. Each shot was carefully aimed and deliberately placed, designed to create maximum disruption among the enemy forces, but the reinforcements kept coming. More vehicles appeared at the valley entrance, disgorging fighters who immediately spread out and began advancing on the compound. Marcus counted at least 20 new enemies, far more than he could handle with his limited ammunition. Down in the compound, the armored vehicle finally roared to life. Marcus felt a surge of relief as he saw his teammates beginning their withdrawal toward the valley entrance. But their route would take them directly through the area where the reinforcements were deploying, creating a deadly gauntlet they would have to run. Marcus shifted his fire to the enemies threatening his teammates' escape route. A fighter with an RPG was setting up behind a boulder near the valley entrance, positioning himself to destroy the armored vehicle as it passed. Marcus put 2 quick shots into him before he could fire, watching the man fall backward as his weapon clattered down the slope. The armored vehicle was picking up speed now, but enemy fire was intensifying around it. Marcus could see muzzle flashes from dozens of positions as fighters tried to disable the vehicle or kill its occupants. The reinforced truck was taking hits but continuing to move, a testament to Marcus's careful maintenance and the quality of its armor. From his position on the ridge, Marcus continued to provide covering fire, engaging any enemy who posed a direct threat to the vehicle's escape. His ammunition situation was becoming critical. He was down to his final magazine and would soon be limited to his sidearm. A group of fighters began climbing the slope toward Marcus's position, apparently deciding that eliminating the sniper was more important than pursuing the escaping vehicle. Marcus welcomed their attention, knowing that every enemy focused on him was one less shooting at his teammates. The first climber made it halfway up the slope before Marcus spotted him moving between the rocks. A single well-placed shot sent him tumbling back down the mountainside. The others learned caution from their comrade's fate and began using better concealment, making Marcus's job more difficult. Through his radio, Marcus could hear his teammates coordinating their escape. They were taking fire, but making good progress toward the valley mouth. Thompson's voice cut through the static. "Wheels, we're at the extraction point." "Get down here now!" Marcus looked down at the compound and saw the armored vehicle stopped near the valley entrance. His teammates had reached relative safety, but they were waiting for him instead of completing their escape. He felt a surge of affection for these men who were willing to risk everything for their driver. "Negative, Alpha Leader," Marcus replied. "Too many hostiles between me and your position. Complete the extraction without me." He could hear Thompson arguing, but Marcus had already switched his radio off. His teammates needed to leave while they still could, and his presence was the only thing keeping them from making that decision. The fighters climbing toward his position were getting closer. Marcus could hear them calling to each other in their native language, coordinating their approach. He counted at least 6 voices, too many for him to handle with conventional tactics, especially with his ammunition running so low. Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of waiting for the enemy to reach his position, he abandoned his cover and began moving along the ridgeline, staying just ahead of his pursuers while continuing to engage targets below. It was a desperate gamble, but it kept him mobile and unpredictable. His movement along the exposed ridge made him visible to every enemy in the compound, and suddenly dozens of weapons were firing in his direction. Bullets whined past his head and sparked off rocks around his feet as he ran from cover to cover along the mountainside. But Marcus's bold move had an unexpected effect. By making himself such an obvious target, he was drawing fire away from the compound and the valley entrance. Every shot aimed at him was a shot not aimed at his escaping teammates. He was providing them with the distraction they needed to complete their withdrawal. Through gaps in the gunfire, Marcus could hear the sound of the armored vehicle's engine growing more distant. His teammates were finally leaving, though he was sure they were doing so reluctantly. The knowledge that they would survive gave him a sense of satisfaction that made his own desperate situation seem worthwhile. His rifle clicked empty as he engaged his final target from the original group. 16 down. Marcus dropped the empty weapon and drew his sidearm, a M9 pistol with 3 magazines remaining. The handgun had much less range and stopping power than his rifle, but it would have to do. The fighters pursuing him along the ridge were close enough now that he could hear their footsteps on the rocky ground. Marcus found a defensive position between 2 large boulders and prepared for close-quarters combat. His army training had included extensive work with pistols, but he had never expected to rely on those skills while facing overwhelming odds on a mountainside in Afghanistan. A shadow moved between the rocks to his right, and Marcus spun toward it with his pistol raised. The enemy fighter was less than 30 feet away, close enough that Marcus could see his face clearly. Both men fired simultaneously, but Marcus's training and experience gave him the edge. 17 down. More shadows were moving among the rocks now, and Marcus realized that his defensive position was about to be overrun. He had perhaps 2 minutes before the enemy fighters reached his location, and after that his chances of survival would drop to nearly 0, but his teammates were safe and that made everything worthwhile. Marcus heard the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoing through the valley, just as the enemy fighters closed in on his position. For a moment, he allowed himself to hope that rescue was coming, but the aircraft sounded too far away to reach him in time. His teammates had made it to safety and called for backup, but Marcus would have to survive the next few minutes on his own. The first enemy fighter appeared around the left boulder, his AK-47 raised and ready to fire. Marcus was faster, putting 2 quick shots into the man's chest from a range of 15 feet. The fighter dropped immediately, but Marcus could hear others moving to surround his position. 18 down, but how many were left? A grenade landed near Marcus's feet, bouncing off the rocks with a metallic clatter that made his heart stop. He dove away from the explosive just as it detonated, the blast throwing rock fragments and dust in all directions. The explosion left Marcus's ears ringing and temporarily stunned, but miraculously uninjured. Using the dust cloud as concealment, Marcus crawled to a new position among the rocks. His movement was just in time. Automatic weapons fire tore through the space where he had been hiding, sending chips of stone flying in all directions. The enemy knew approximately where he was but couldn't pinpoint his exact location. 2 fighters rushed his previous position, while a third provided covering fire from higher up the slope. Marcus waited until they were committed to their approach, then rose from behind a boulder and engaged both men with rapid aimed shots. His pistol training served him well at close range, and both targets went down quickly. 19, 20 down. But the covering fire from above forced Marcus to seek new shelter immediately. Bullets sparked off the rocks around him as he moved, one passing so close to his head that he felt the shock wave. His new position gave him concealment but limited his ability to see approaching enemies. The helicopter sounds were getting closer, and Marcus could now distinguish multiple aircraft. Hope flickered in his chest as he realized that a significant rescue force was approaching. But he still had to survive long enough for them to reach his position, and the enemy fighters seemed determined to finish him before help could arrive. A fighter tried to flank Marcus from the right, moving quietly among the rocks in an attempt to get behind him. Marcus heard the subtle scrape of boot on stone and spun toward the sound, firing twice at a shadow moving between boulders. The shadow fell, and Marcus heard a weapon clattering down the mountainside. 21 down. His pistol ammunition was running dangerously low. He had perhaps 10 shots remaining across his 3 magazines. Every shot had to count now, and Marcus found himself being more selective about his targets, waiting for closer, more certain shots rather than engaging enemies at longer ranges. The helicopter noise suddenly became much louder, and Marcus looked up to see 2 Apache attack helicopters cresting the ridge. The sight of the aircraft filled him with renewed hope, but he knew the pilots would need time to identify targets and coordinate their attacks. He still had to hold his position for a few more crucial minutes. The enemy fighters had heard the helicopters too, and their tactics changed immediately. Instead of methodically closing in on Marcus's position, they began rushing him from multiple directions simultaneously, hoping to finish him before the air support could intervene. 3 fighters charged his position from different angles, their weapons firing on full automatic. Marcus felt like he was in the middle of a deadly storm, as bullets whined past him from every direction. He engaged the closest target first, putting him down with 2 quick shots, then spun toward the second fighter who was already within 20 feet. The second fighter's weapon jammed at the crucial moment, giving Marcus the split second he needed to acquire the target and fire. The man fell backward, his useless rifle spinning away across the rocks. 23 down. But the third fighter was still coming, and Marcus's pistol clicked empty as he tried to engage him. Marcus dove behind the nearest boulder as the enemy fighter's bullets sparked off the rocks where he had been standing. He ejected his empty magazine and slammed in a fresh one, but the fighter was already moving to flank his position. With no time to properly aim, Marcus rolled around the boulder and fired blindly at the approaching enemy. His first shot missed, but his second caught the fighter in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. The wounded man tried to bring his weapon to bear on Marcus, but his injured arm couldn't support the rifle's weight. Marcus's third shot finished him. 24 down. Above them, the Apache helicopters had identified the hostile forces and began their attack runs. The distinctive sound of 30mm cannon fire echoed across the mountainside as the aircraft engaged targets in the compound below. Marcus could see explosions blooming throughout the valley as the helicopters systematically destroyed enemy positions. But several fighters remained on the ridge with Marcus, and they were still determined to kill him before making their own escape. 2 more men appeared among the rocks, moving with the discipline of experienced soldiers rather than militia fighters. These were the enemy's best men, saved for the final assault. Marcus had 6 shots remaining in his current magazine and 1 full magazine after that. Against 2 determined fighters with automatic weapons, his chances were not good. But he had come too far to give up now. His teammates were safe, help was arriving, and he was going to survive this fight if humanly possible. The first fighter moved with tactical precision, using cover effectively as he closed the distance to Marcus's position. The second man provided covering fire, forcing Marcus to keep his head down while his partner advanced. These men knew what they were doing, and Marcus realized he was facing opponents as skilled as himself. Marcus waited for the covering fire to pause as the gunman changed magazines, then popped up long enough to engage the advancing fighter. His shot took the man in the chest, but the fighter's body armor absorbed most of the impact. The man staggered but kept coming, now less than 10 yards away. A second shot to the same target finally brought him down, but Marcus had to immediately duck as the covering fire resumed with renewed intensity. The remaining fighter was using his partner's sacrifice to get into a better position, and Marcus could hear him moving closer among the rocks. The helicopter support was devastating the remaining enemy forces below, but the pilots couldn't engage targets on the ridge without risking Marcus's life. He was on his own against the final enemy fighter, a skilled opponent who had managed to get within close range despite the overwhelming firepower circling overhead. Marcus heard the distinctive sound of a pin being pulled from a grenade. The enemy fighter was preparing to blast him out of his position, ending the fight with one final desperate gamble. Marcus had perhaps 3 seconds to act before the explosive would be thrown into his hiding place among the rocks. With no good options remaining, Marcus made a decision that his army instructors would have called either brilliant or insane. Instead of waiting for the grenade, he charged directly toward the enemy fighter's position, hoping to close the distance before the explosive could be thrown effectively. 25 down and 1 more to go. Marcus's desperate charge caught the final enemy fighter completely off guard. The man had expected his opponent to cower behind cover while the grenade cooked off, not come sprinting directly at him with a pistol raised. For a crucial half-second, the fighter froze in surprise, and that hesitation cost him his life. Marcus fired 3 quick shots as he closed the distance, his training taking over completely in the final moments of combat. The first shot missed high, but the second and third found their target. The enemy fighter dropped his grenade and fell backward, his weapon clattering across the rocky ground. 26 down. The grenade rolled harmlessly down the slope and exploded 30 feet away, sending up a shower of rock fragments but causing no damage to anyone. Marcus stood among the boulders for a moment, his pistol still raised and ready, making sure no other threats remained. The ridge was finally quiet except for the sound of helicopters circling overhead. Below in the valley, the Apache helicopters continued their systematic destruction of the remaining enemy forces. Marcus counted at least 6 more explosions as the aircraft eliminated fighters who had been trapped in the compound by his teammates' escape. The total enemy casualties were climbing toward 40, though Marcus had personally accounted for 26 of them. His radio crackled back to life as rescue forces established communication. "This is Rescue 6. Can you identify the friendly on the ridge?" Marcus keyed his mic with hands that were finally beginning to shake as the adrenaline wore off. "This is SEAL Team Alpha Driver, requesting immediate extraction. I'm the only friendly up here." Within minutes, a Black Hawk helicopter settled onto the ridge near Marcus's position. The downdraft from its rotors sent dust swirling around him as medics jumped out and rushed to his aid. Marcus realized for the first time that he was wounded in several places, his shoulder, thigh, and numerous cuts from rock fragments. As the medics worked on his injuries, Marcus asked about his teammates. "Alpha Team is safe and en route to base," one of the medics told him. "They're the ones who called in the cavalry. Said their driver had gone crazy and was single-handedly holding off half the Taliban army." During the helicopter flight back to base, Marcus finally had time to process what had happened. In less than 2 hours, he had gone from being a quiet support soldier to the central figure in one of the most intense firefights of the war. His secret past as an Army Ranger was no longer secret, and his teammates would never look at him the same way again. Lieutenant Commander Thompson was waiting when Marcus's helicopter landed at the base medical facility. As the medics wheeled Marcus toward the field hospital, Thompson walked alongside his stretcher with the expression of amazement and respect. "Wheels," Thompson said, "we need to have a long conversation about your background when you're feeling better." "That was the most incredible display of combat skill I've ever witnessed." Marcus managed a tired smile. "I guess my secret's out now, sir." The debriefing sessions that followed revealed the full scope of what Marcus had accomplished. Intelligence analysts determined that he had faced a total of 43 enemy fighters during the engagement, personally eliminating 26 of them, while the helicopter gunships accounted for the rest. The enemy force had been a specially assembled unit designed to capture or kill American Special Operations Forces. Marcus's actions had not only saved his teammates' lives, but had prevented the enemy from achieving a significant propaganda victory. The failed ambush became a major tactical defeat for hostile forces in the region, demonstrating that American soldiers would fight with incredible tenacity, even when facing overwhelming odds. When the full story reached higher command levels, Marcus found himself the subject of attention he never wanted. Military journalists wanted interviews, commanders wanted to meet him, and there was talk of medals and commendations. All Marcus wanted was to return to his quiet role as a driver and forget the whole experience, but his teammates wouldn't let him retreat into anonymity. Sergeant Chen summed up their feelings during a team meeting a week after the engagement. "Wheels, you saved all our lives out there. We always respected you, but now we understand who you really are. You're not just our driver, you're one of us, the official." After-action report described the engagement as an exceptional display of individual combat effectiveness against numerically superior forces. Marcus's actions earned him a Silver Star for gallantry in action, though he accepted the medal reluctantly and with typical modesty. More importantly to Marcus, all 5 members of his SEAL team returned home safely from their deployment. Thompson, Chen, and the others went on to successful careers in the military, and they remained close friends with the man they had known as just their driver. They never forgot the day they learned what their quiet teammate was truly capable of when his friends were in danger. Years later, Marcus would retire from the Navy and return to civilian life in San Diego with his wife Sarah. He rarely spoke about his combat experiences, preferring to focus on the present rather than the past. But sometimes, when he was working on his car in the garage or helping neighbors with mechanical problems, people would notice the small scars on his hands and arms. Those who knew his story understood that the quiet, helpful man with the gentle smile had once stood alone on a mountain ridge in Afghanistan, and fought off an entire enemy company to save his friends. But Marcus never talked about it unless directly asked, and even then, he would simply say that he had just been doing his job as a driver, making sure his passengers got home safely. The legend of the SEAL team's chauffeur who took down 32 enemies in combat became one of those stories that military personnel tell to illustrate the warrior spirit that can emerge from the most unexpected places. But for Marcus Rivera, it was simply the day he proved that sometimes the most important battles are fought not for glory or recognition, but for the people we care about most.